Hello, friends. Hi there. It's been a minute. I'm going to start by lighting a little of this season's newly harvested sage and cedar in the pot here just to prepare our space as we get ready to talk about spirits, right? I hope you're all doing well. There we go. I got a little bonfire here in front of me. There we go. That will fill the room. Can you see that smoke? There we go. So here we are. Let's say cheers. It's getting hot again. This is August. Oh, well, no, actually, it's the 1st of September. And it's been cool for the past week or so, and it's just starting to heat up again. So I have a nice icy lemonade. So cheers. Tasty. You know, you only have hot lemonades in the winter, and in the summertime, a nice frosty lemonade is always delicious. So let's see. The frame rate is too low. Please set the frame rate to 15. I don't know what this means. Hold on, let me go back. I have no idea what that means. I'm going to get rid of it. There we go. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about some things that have been happening to me throughout this summer. It's been quite an eventful summer. I hope you've all had and in a good way, not in tragic ways as sometimes can occur, especially at this time in our lives, or in my life anyway. But things have been very interesting. I spent a lot of time in Wisconsin at my family's lake house. I don't know why it's telling me action needed. Just a second. I may have to trim this. Just a minute. Current frame rate is too low. I do not know. I do not know how to do this. So I'm going to just go with what I have. Sorry if the frame rate is too low and you have a lessened viewing experience. Please accept my apologies, but this is new since I've done this before. This is the first time I'm doing this on my computer. I've always recorded these from my phone, so maybe things are different here. I don't know. I'm going to forge ahead anyway. So this summer, I got to spend a lot of time up at our family's house in Northwest Wisconsin. And this is a place that is like home to me. Now, I grew up in Chicago, but we spent every summer up in Wisconsin in this little town where I spent my summer, my month of July this year. And, well, not town, this little area, because it's pretty wooded and wild. So how we got there, it's been in my family since the 1930s. We've been going there. Well, my grandfather, let me tell you the story from start to finish. So my gramps, he was heading up by himself, driving north on US 53, which was just a little, two-laner, all the way through Wisconsin to head up to Canada. He was going to cross into Duluth and go into Canada to go fishing. And about mid-afternoon on, I believe, his second or third day on the road from Chicago, he saw a little general store in the little town just adjacent, and he was hungry, so he pulled into the general store and went inside and met the proprietor's husband and wife, Herman and Frida. and asked them to make him a sandwich. Now, there were no, of course, no fast food places, of course, in the early 1930s, and there were no restaurants either along his road for many, many miles. So he figured a general store would have a meat counter, and they would have cheese and bread and maybe some ham or salami, and could fix him up a sandwich. And that's what he did. And when he was in there, there was another gentleman there named Harry. And he starts talking, and my grandfather just talked to anybody all the time. He was the most gregarious, outgoing person, just this delightful, charming gentleman. So he's talking to the folks, and he's telling them, they're asking where he's headed, and he says he's going to Canada to go fishing. And Harry pipes up and says, "What are you going to travel all the way to Canada for, when the best fishing in the world is right here? As a matter of fact, I know the best fishing places, secret fishing places, where you can get a northern pike from as long as you are tall." Harry loved to tell a story. He also said that it was the wild blueberries were ripe, and his wife had made some fresh wild blueberry pies, and his wife made the best pie in 4 continents, which probably was true. And he should come and stay with them on their farm, and Harry would take him fishing, and his wife would feed him, and he could have pie and go fishing in the morning. And my Gramps, being the kind of guy that was ready for an adventure, agreed and went with Harry back to his place, where he and his wife Gert lived with Gert's parents in a multi-family farm. They had different cabins and things on the place. And of course, my Gramps paid them room and board to stay with Harry and go fishing. And sure enough, if he didn't catch the biggest fish he'd ever seen, and he didn't have to drive all the way to Canada. So when he left, he set up with Harry to come back the next year and the next. And then he started to grow a family. And at that time also, the Depression started to hit. So my grandfather took my grandmother and the little kids, her 3 little kids at the time, up to the farm in Wisconsin. And they would spend between May and October there before the weather got too bad, because they just had a cabin on the property. And they were able to raise chickens and pigs and have eggs and have meat and have a garden and live very economically there and pay room and board to Harry and Gert, thus helping them as well through these troubled times. My grandfather stayed in Chicago to work at his factory. He had his own factory where he made safety equipment. And he would ride the train up 1 or 2 weekends a month and stay for a long weekend and go fishing. And then in the 40s, when things got better and business was looking up, he and some friends of his bought like a quarter of the lakeshore of this beautiful Bond Lake up nearby to where Harry and Gert lived, and set up this Bondwood Association. And my Gramps built a cabin, and his pals built a cabin, or one got the original homestead from the lake, and made it a summer place. And so my mother spent time there. And then when we came along, we spent time there, and we would go up and spend 2-3 weeks up north on the lake with where Granny and Gramps were next door, and just have a glorious time up there from my earliest childhood. And then in my early adolescence, Harry and Gert had bought a new place of their own where Harry had a bait shop, and he wanted to retire. So he sold his home with the bait shop to my parents, and that became our place up north. So ever since my early adolescence, that has been the place I have returned to wherever I've been, wherever I've roamed, is always would go there. And when I lived in Michigan and my mother lived in Illinois, I would go and spend time with her a couple of weeks in the summer there up north, and we would do Granny's camp when my kids were little. And that was where I spent the most time with my mother and where my mother was happiest. And she raised her teenagers out of the city in the 70s up there. And my dad did like what my gramps did. He stayed in town and worked, and he would come up once in a while on a weekend and fish and hang out with us and then go back down to the city. So when my parents, before my parents passed away, they set this property up in trust for their children and their progeny so that it would be a place that we could always come, and did it pretty mindfully so that it could be preserved. And when they passed away, it was passed on into this trust to all of us. And so we do this lottery every year about which weeks you get to be there, and everybody pitches in financially to keep it afloat, and it has a trust to help sustain it. And it's just this magical, wonderful place that is home. And this year, usually I spend a week there, maybe 10 days. And usually within that is at least half of that time is spent with Granny's Camp. And Granny's Camp is where, now it is where my nieces and nephews and my own children's children come to camp. And so when I've gone up there, it has been to work for camp. And since my mother has passed away, she's not there, but I get to connect with my family, my nieces and my nephews and my great nieces and nephews and my siblings that go up and do Granny's Camp too. But this year, I got the luck of the lottery, and I was also willing to relinquish a few days. You get 7 days, and there was a short week that was between the 4th of July and Granny's Camp this year. Now, the 4th of July has always been a family reunion, and this is my mother's extended family. These are distant cousins, up to fourth cousins, that come from California, from the East Coast, from northern West Coast, from the far south, from the Southwest. People just all gather up on this lake where we all gathered as kids, and we have a family reunion over the 4th of July. And so I took the short week after the 4th, for my week that gave me 5 days between the family reunion and Granny's Camp. And this was like heaven. So the 4th of July happened, and on the 5th, over the 4th of July, anybody who wants to from my family can stay up at Manna Bear, is what we call the place up there, can stay for free. And then they had to leave on the 5th, and that was when my week started. So the day that everyone was leaving, there's a lot of cleanup. There were a lot of people there, including my sister Kate's family. Her son and her daughter were there, and her son and his wife and their 3 little kids, who she just adored so much. And for those of you who don't know, my sister Kate passed last October, and she just adored those kids and adored her children. And she always came to Granny's Camp too. She was one of the grannies at Granny's Camp, and this would be the first year that she would not be there and physically there. So it's this hectic pack up goings on in the house, and everybody's trying to gather all their stuff, and it's strewn all over the place. There's a living room, dining room, kitchen, big screen porch, bedrooms, stuff everywhere out all over the house, and these little families are trying to pack up their stuff. And I'm going to be there, and so I asked them, please make sure you take out the garbage before you go, because you have to schlep it down the ramp, and it's this big, heavy dumpster that the trash goes in. So the trash is empty, and I was putting a new bag in the trash can, and I couldn't find the lid to the kitchen can. Now, the kitchen trash bin has one of those pedals that you step on and it flips up the lid. And because there's toddlers, there's little kids there, and if your hands are full, you can step on that thing and dump stuff in that trash bin. But the lid was gone, and there's the trash wide open, and there's the toddlers about to, able to get into anything in there. And you know how kids are dragging things out of trash bins. I don't know, but they do. And we are searching everywhere for this lid, and we can't find it. We think, well, maybe one of the toddlers took it and hauled it over out on the screen porch where the toys are in the corner of the screen porch. So we went and looked there. And now the rest of my family is all packing and getting ready. So I'm searching for this lid to the trash can. And when my nephew was going to get some ice for a water bottle or a drink of some kind, he opens up the freezer on the porch. Now, when you come in, you come up a ramp or upstairs, and there's a small entryway porch. And on that porch, there's a spare refrigerator because there's always a crowd up north. And there's a great big freezer, you know, full size stand up freezer. And he opened the freezer door and went to get ice. The ice was in a bag on the top shelf of the freezer. And on top of the bag of ice was the lid to the trash bin. And he's like, "Who put this here?" And we're like, "What? How did that get there? That's insane. It's way too high for any of the children who were there to do it. It's not the type of thing someone would do as a prank because it's the trash lid. And to put it on top of the ice bag for ice for beverages, that's not something someone would do. And someone would not absently have it in their hand and go to get something out of the freezer and just set it down on the ice and then forget about it and close the freezer and move on. That just, it's not reasonable. But everybody was in a rush. And so it was just one of those things. And it was just, you know, well, that's weird. And I put the trash back on, the lid back on, and snapped it down. And it was pretty cold. And I was just thinking to myself, I wonder if that's Kate trying to get the attention of her kids as they're getting ready to go. I didn't know. I kind of knew. That was what I thought. So then after a while, the bustle all leaves and everybody's gone. And then I had an appointment for an interview for a podcast. And the cleaning lady was coming. Now, I asked my sister Colleen, my younger sister Colleen. She serves on the trustee board, which is not an easy task because I have a big family, a lot of siblings, and we are all head cooks. We are all, CEOs of our lives. We are all the boss. And here is a group of 3 who have been tasked with, managing the place that we all love and the rules about it and all this kind of stuff with all these opinionated siblings and, and all of our baggage that we bring to it too. So I just really appreciate what they do. And my younger sister, Colleen, is one of those. And she was up for the 4th, and so I asked her if she wanted to stay a day or 2 with me after everybody else leaves. And I asked Carol, too, my brother Tom's wife, because we're really good pals. And I thought, oh, this could be great. I could have Colleen and Carol here for a couple days. It could be just the 3 of us could hang out. And then I could have several days by myself. And Carol had to go because her kids, she rode with kids and they needed auxiliary adults along. So she wasn't able to stay, but Colleen did. So that afternoon, the cleaning lady came. I was on the porch, hooked up, doing my interview. And Colleen was down at the beach, sitting on the pontoon, which is really comfy. You could sit in the sun right on the lake. And she was just sitting down there and enjoying her solitude. And then the cleaning lady cleaned up, finished everything. I finished my stuff, and I went outside through the kitchen, and I told Colleen, that the cleaning lady's leaving or something. I don't know what I did, but said goodbye, whatever. And then, we had a cash jar, so we paid the cleaning lady out of that. And then I went back in the living room, in the quiet, clean, pristine house where I just always feel my mother so viscerally. She is always there. When I first go, I walk in and say, "Hi, Mom. I'm here. It's T.I." She knows it's me. But I always said that coming there and just greeting her and feeling greeted by her. And you just feel, when somebody puts their energy into a place like that and loves so much. Every time I would walk in, the look on her face and, oh, my Ti, and the big hugs in her, that energy stays there and absorbs in the walls. So I always feel her there. So I sat in that big recliner in the corner. It's the leather recliner, and the rest of the furniture in the living room is the furniture from my parents' house in Chicago. When they passed away, that good furniture replaced the broken, really smelly, mouse-infested stuff that used to be there. So I was sitting in the recliner, and Colleen came in, and she sat kitty corner from me across the room in the sofa, and we were talking. And she was asking me about the podcast, and it was a paranormal thing. So she was asking me about a bunch of things. And she said to me, she asked me if I had seen Kate or felt Kate. And I said, all the time. And I said, that's when I told her I think that the trash can lid was Kate. And she said, do you think so? It didn't just get misplaced? And I said, on the top of the freezer, on the top of the ice bay? No, I think that's her. Well, it was somebody, because it wasn't a living person who would do something like that. And then she told me that she has not had any contact from her, and that she was worried because when Kate died, they were sort of on, it's like a seesaw. Sometimes you're BFFs, and the other time you're kind of ticked off at one another for this, that, or the other thing. And it wasn't a really positive time for Kate to die for Colleen. She felt like things were unresolved, and she had said that she had no communications from Kate at all. She hadn't had a dream about her. She had not felt her anywhere, and she was just really worried that maybe she was still angry with her. And I told her, I said, that doesn't happen. That doesn't, being angry doesn't matter. Our little tiffs don't matter in the big picture, when you think about it. Is that something you're going to remember, when you understand the nature of reality? I don't think so. So we were talking about that and talking about Kate, and she had even gone to see a psychic to try to communicate and find out, what how what was going on and all this stuff, and she felt like maybe there was a connection there, but she just kept saying that she has not felt that Kate has given her any kind of signs or anything. And then so we just talked about this for quite a while, and then it was late in the afternoon, and as we do up north, as is the tradition in the afternoon, my mother started this with us when we were adults and would go there, that we would have an afternoon cocktail. And so I said, oh, I think it's cocktail hour. Let's go make a cocktail, and then we'll finish our conversation. So we went in the kitchen to go get glasses out of the cupboard. And under the cupboard where the glasses are is the dish drainer next to the sink. And on the dish drainer are the two racks from inside the oven. Now the oven had been acting up. Okay, so in the spring, when we had Sisters Week, the oven was not working. It was on the fritz. We tried to get a hold of somebody to come out, but it was, weekend. Nobody was going to be able to be there till after we were there. And here we are without a stove that works. And, we had all these plans of cooking food together, and we're trying to think, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? So we had gotten a hold of Annie, who lives up there. My sister Annie can fix anything. And she said, well, let me just take a look at it. So she pulls out we pull the stove out. She comes over wearing her tool belt with her little kit with all her electrical testing things. And she pulls out the stove, first checks the outlet. Yep, no, the outlet's working fine. Opens up the back of the stove and sees that there's some fraying of some of the wires back there. So she reconnects them and wraps them with electrical tape and, fixes everything up just fine and plugs it in and pushes it back, and bam, everything works like a charm. So then when the kids were all up over the 4th of July, it worked great until then. And it worked great until the last day, the day before everyone was going to leave, where they tried to make some pizzas in the oven, and the oven wasn't working right. Like half of the elements in the oven weren't coming on, and half were, so the pizza was like raw on one side and overdone on the other. So the stove was not working very well. But, it was old, so you just make do until you keep fixing things until you can't fix them anymore, right? So here are these oven racks on the dish drainer. And Colleen goes, those weren't there before. And I said, well, they made bacon in the oven this morning, so maybe the cleaning lady took them out and washed them. Maybe they were greasy and she noticed and cleaned them and just forgot to put them back. And Colleen said, no, they weren't here when I came in back in the house. And I was thinking, I didn't see them when I went out either. And it was the first thing we noticed, because there are these great big, it was a huge oven. So there are these great big racks rested on top of the dish drainer. There's no, do you just not see that? Maybe, but I don't think so. So Colleen said, well, whatever, I'm going to just put them back in. And she said, it's cool today. It had been really hot for a few days, and it had cooled off to a really nice temperature. She said, I'm going to clean the oven after the 4th, before the rest of the summer, especially if they were cooking bacon in there. So it's a self-cleaning oven. So she puts the racks back in, closes the oven up, and goes to push the buttons up on the top, and there's no lights on any of the displays. And she says, wait, what's going on here? It's not on. She's trying to push the things, and she says, maybe it's the breaker. She said, Pete once told me that sometimes it'll throw the breaker in the basement. So she goes down, and she didn't know which one it was. So there are 2 breaker boxes in the basement. And she starts just shutting things off. And I said, okay, that was the lights on the porch. And then all of a sudden there's just beep, 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 beep. That was the breaker for the alarm system. We have an alarm system up there. And then she puts that back on, and the alarm is still not beep. It's like, now it's not doing its thing. The alarm is acting weird. So she finally finds what is probably the stove, flips and nothing happened. There is no light coming on. Now, by this time, it's late, and I'm like, well, we're going to have to figure out something for dinner. And so I say, well, we have a griddle. I'll go get something. I can go run into the market and then get something that I can make on the griddle. And the plug-in griddle, and did that. Meanwhile, we contacted Annie and said, when you come tomorrow, she was planning to come the next day, we were going to hang out, bring your tools, because the stove is acting up again. And she said, well, I'm in bed now. I said, no, not now, tomorrow. So she said, okay. So we cooked something, I don't remember, mushrooms, and I don't know what we cooked on the griddle. Had dinner together, stayed up late, talked a whole lot, climbed into bed on the porch, side by side. Each of our beds were next to each other on the screen porch. And it got quiet. You could hear the frogs down at the lake. Oh, I forgot a really important thing. This is probably the most important thing, so I'm going to back up. So when the stove wasn't working, we decided, well, screw it. We got a hold of Annie. We're going to just go and sit down and have our cocktails and worry about the rest of it at a different time. So we go back in the living room. And when we get in there, sorry, when we go in the living room, I go back to the recliner. And I go to sit down in the recliner, but the cushion is sticking out probably 8, maybe even 10 inches, probably 8 inches off the edge of the recliner. And for me to sit down, I have to put my arms on the arms of the chair and lower myself down because my knees just don't work that way. I have to get up with help and I have to get down with help. And with that thing way out, I would have to reach way back, and it would have been, I would have had to flop back in the chair, and I had not done that. So I stood up and I tried pushing the cushion down in, and Colleen had now come in and sat back in her same spot where she was sitting. And I'm trying to push this cushion in, and it's not going in, and it's still sticking out, inches and inches. And Colleen says, wait a minute, that's the wrong cushion. And I said, what do you mean that's the wrong cushion? And she said, that's not the cushion for the chair. Now the sofas, the leather, they're all brown leather, but it's a slightly different color. The recliner's a little more red. And it didn't match the chair. And so she stood up and looked, and where she was sitting was the cushion for the recliner. And the recliner cushion, the sofa cushion, was what was on the recliner. So while we were in the kitchen and the basement and doing all this, trying to figure out this dang stove and making our cocktails, having them get watered down over all this time, those couch cushions, the couch and the chair cushion, had switched. There is no way I would have been able to sit down in that chair with the cushion that was on there. And I do not know how that happens, how something that big can move. Just switch, switch a cushion. This cushion goes there, this one goes there. Something that we would not be able to ignore. We poo-pooed the racks on the dish drainer. We poo-pooed the lid of the trash can. This is stuff moving around the house. This is big stuff moving around the house. And Colleen is still saying, I've had no contact. And now here are 2 heavy leather cushions that have been switched. So I said to Colleen, I think Kate might be reaching out and saying, yes, I'm here. Or somebody, maybe Mom. But my mother has been gone much longer, and she has never moved things around. You just feel her there, you feel her protection, and you feel her love there, but she doesn't move stuff. She's never moved stuff. Sometimes you see a little streak that looks like a little child, because she often said, this would have been heaven for me as a child. And so I'm thinking, she's there with heaven as a child. And so we see her sometimes, and the cleaning lady has sometimes seen this little blonde. She calls it a boy, because when my mother was a little girl, she never wore a shirt. Blonde, curly hair, running fast through the house. But she's never moved things. So I'm thinking that was Kate. And that was Kate making a big statement. Now, we called my sister Kate the Queen of Hyperbole. Everything was huge. Everything was fabulous. Everything was tremendous. Things weren't just good. Things were unbelievably stupendous. This was Kate. She lived big. She made a big impact, and she was moving big things around the house. And so we laughed. And we said, okay, Kate, thanks. We know you're here. We love you. And kind of just laughed about it. And then made food on the grill, didn't use the stove, unplugged it. Colleen cleaned out all behind it and stuff, because we figured we were going to have a service person out there. She didn't want crumbs or any mouse droppings there. She's like that. She takes good care of the place. And then we spent our evening. We climbed. That's when it takes us to climbing in the bed on the porch. And where I was laying in the bed that when we were there all together as sisters the last time, where Kate slept. And Colleen was sleeping in the bed where I had slept. And I just felt, here we were, these two old sisters. We are old women. We're these two old sisters, and we look exactly alike. And I could just feel my other sisters there. The ones who were living still, and the ones who were not. And just knew, just felt this overwhelming love and protection from her, from my mother, from all our ancestors who made it possible for us to have this place. Even my father, who I rarely spent time with there. My father I would see in Chicago, but he was very rarely there when I was there. He didn't come up for Granny's camp when our kids were little. That was a little too crazy for him, I think. So I went to sleep with that. And then the next day, Annie came over. We made poached eggs in the microwave. You could do that. Era taught me how. It's really easy. So we poached some eggs in the microwave for breakfast. And then Annie came over with her tool belt and her toolkit. And before she gets to work, she says, well, let me just first check the outlet again. And so we pull the stove out for her, and the outlet's working fine. And we said, well, why don't you, just sit down for a minute. And I said, oh, we've got something to tell you. And she said, what? So she sat at the kitchen table with the stove pulled out, and she was ready to unscrew the back to open it up. And it was unplugged by this time before she was going to unscrew the back. So we told her of all the happenings over the last couple of days. We told her of the trash can lid. We told her of the cushions. We told her of the racks, the stove racks, and how in the morning the lights were on the stove and the racks were out and the stove was completely shut down. And Annie is looking at us and she said, I'm not opening the back of that stove. She said, I pay attention to things like that. And she said, this stove is dangerous. That's what all this is about. We've already fixed frayed wires. If there were mice in there chewing on them or something, we already messed with and taped things together in there. And in 5 days, 24 children under 10 and 41 people are going to be fed from this kitchen. And the only exit to this place is out this back door through the kitchen. And the stove has got shorts in it. Do you know how dangerous that is? She said. I'm not going to fix it. So we need a new stove. Now, when we were up for Sisters Week, we were hoping for a new stove because it wasn't working. And my two brothers, who are also on the board, who are the ones who believe that you fix it until you can't fix it anymore, which is environmentally friendly, but also when you're talking about electrical appliances can be a little dangerous. And so they decided that it's working now, so we'll just wait till later. We don't have to fix it now since it's working now. We'll worry about it when it breaks completely, like when the roof is coming down. You just, put little patch boards up there. But that's how they are. And so we had found a really cool stove before. And that's when they said, no, just fix it. So Colleen gets a hold of the appliance dealer, the local appliance dealer in Hayward, which is about 30 miles away. That's the closest. And they can't deliver it till the day after camp starts. Now, we don't have a stove. We have all these people coming, and I kind of tried. I gently told Rachel, because Rachel's in charge of camp, and the welcome dinner for everybody on the first night of Granny's camp was going to be big spaghetti dinner, because my mom always did a big spaghetti dinner as the welcome dinner. And I said, how about we do a grilling welcome dinner because the stove's broken. And she's like, oh my God. And I said, don't worry, it will come. They're going to have a new stove. It's going to be great. And it's this really cool, great stove. So then it's like waiting for it to be delivered. Everybody's at camp, we're having cereal and fruit for breakfast. I had tacos planned for the second night that we could do in a crock pot and figure out how to do stuff without a stove. It was like for 41 people. I don't panic about that. You just do it. Oh God. And then when the stove comes, they plug it in and it's not working. And we were all out for our morning meeting, and the big truck comes in and unloads this truck, and all the kids and adults are all cheering, yay, the new stove, and everybody's waving goodbye to the old stove, and as they're taking it away. But when they plug it in, it's just not working right. And it turns out there was something wrong with the outlet as well. So we couldn't get an electrician out there right then, and instead the electrician FaceTimed with my nephew and managed to fix the wires and make sure that everything was safe, and with a plan to get an electrician out there as soon as one could come. I wonder if an electrician has come yet. Maybe not. But we got that thing working. And that first cook on that stove, I was cooking by myself in the kitchen. Everybody else was outside. And I was sitting at the table. My mother has this great big wooden cutting board. And she would be the one that would be sitting at the table cutting, preparing meals, as we would be out taking care of all the kids and doing activities and all this other kind of stuff. And there I sat at the table cutting up tomatoes, cutting up vegetables and things, cilantro and things for tacos, and preparing the food. And I could feel, my sister Kate, last year at Granny's camp, she was there. And she and I tried to do a lot of the cooking because we both have celiac. And then we were sure that it would be food that we could eat, that we weren't going to get poisoned. And we would sit at that table together and prepare the food, cut up the vegetables, and we would talk and we would laugh. And my sister Kate had the most distinctive laugh in the world. Well, I guess we all kind of do, but hers, you'd hear her in the crowd across the room and know it was her. My mother was the same way. And I just heard her laugh. I heard it, like, there you go. There, you got your new stove. There, you got your new stove. And then she laughed. And I just felt so protected and so grateful that my sister and I had learned to not ignore those things. That stove was a hazard. That outlet was a hazard. And it needed to be addressed. And putting trash can lids in the freezer, switching cushions, big motions, putting the racks on the dish drainer, whatever else was happening, I'm sure there were other things going on. I'm sure there were things being moved all the time when her kids were there, that there were so many people there that you could just write it off as somebody else moved that, somebody else did that. But I'm sure she was doing that. I'm sure she was saying, hey, pay attention, you all have to be safe here, and I'm looking out for you. And so I think my whole theme is to pay attention. When things like that happen, I know this has been a long-winded story with a lot of extraneous information, but the value of the place and the connection to that place that my ancestors have, they are always giving us signs. They are always putting things in front of us to keep us moving forward, to keep us safe, to keep us mindful of what we're doing. When we would argue or talk crap about somebody, when my sisters were all there, the lights would flicker. That was my mother. Knock it off. Stop. She would always do that. If we were arguing or something, she'd say, knock it off. Damn kids. And she was doing that, flickering the lights. When I was doing my podcast interview, it was about my books. And in the first book, there's parts in there about my father. And my mother was my father's, she was his champion and protector. And when I was talking about some issues with him in that house and how it led to things, the internet just kept going out. I kept getting disconnected. I was on Skype, full bars on the internet. We have new Wi-Fi up there, and all of a sudden the Skype would just turn off, and then after a few minutes it would come back on, and then if I mentioned my dad again, it would just turn off. And so I said to the podcaster, I'm really sorry. I'm sure my mother is doing this. You're going to have to do a lot of editing to splice all this stuff together, and maybe we should move on from talking about my dad. And after we did, we never got disconnected again. So they're there. They're doing stuff. They're letting us know that, keeping us on the straight and narrow for my mother, keeping things safe for Kate. She was the oldest of 10 children. She took care of all of us. When we were little, my mother told a story about, she was sitting in the backyard and we were all playing in the pool. And finally, Kate is probably 6 or 7 years old, and there's a bunch of us because there were 10 of us in 13 years. She goes over to my mother and she said, Mom, can you just get the kids out of the pool? I'm exhausted. I can't keep watching them. And my mother was sitting right there watching us. But Kate felt like she needed to watch us to make sure we were safe. And so even now, even from the other side, or wherever she is, around us, everywhere, once first you're here, then you're everywhere, she is still keeping us safe, taking care of business, and making sure that we get nice things like the new really nice stove. So that's my story for tonight. I won't take so long to get back. It's been months. I've just not been feeling it. It's, grief is a funny thing. And so you fill your time with not thinking about, those beyond. And I'm getting to a place where I'm just feeling okay about everything. We never really lose each other. And I think that was part of Kate's message too, that we weren't really sitting there at that table. She was not there for Granny's camp, but she was. And so was my mom. And I felt them both. And I knew that they were both there. And so though the relationship is different, it's a relationship nonetheless. And I'm so grateful for it. So pay attention. Things happen that we just slip past. I don't know how that happened. Well, did I put that there? I didn't put that there. Oh, I must have put that there. Well, maybe not. Is there somebody trying to tell you something? So, cheers, my friends. Sorry for the roundabout story tonight, but that's what I do. You be well. It's still summer, but fall is coming. I'll be back before the spooky times, maybe with something more spooky. There have been other things happening, so be well, be kind to each other, and good night.